Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features X-Men number 80, cover dated October 1998. And this is part 2 of a two-part story which began in Uncanny X-Men number 360. It's part of the X-Men's 35th anniversary celebration, going back to their launch by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby in the autumn of 1963. You can see this is a giant-sized milestone issue. There's 36 pages of story and art in this issue, as well as some bonus images drawn by some alumni from the X-Men titles over the decades, and we'll get to those at the end of the video. The drawing itself here on the cover, which is a holophile cover, is by Carlos Pacheco, inked by Tim Townsend and colored by Liquid. I think it's very effective, this almost triangular design that he has developed here with the upshot on, in particular, Colossus and Kitty Pryde and Ororo, Storm. It makes them look heroic, and it really expresses the grandeur of the X-Men and their heroic exploits. And I think the holofoil is pretty effective on this cover too, in particular on Colossus's organic steel body and the energy effect there emerging from Storm's hand. I think it's pretty good, and it's nice to see the original all new, all different X-Men almost practically entirely reunited here, with Wolverine, Colossus, Storm and Nightcrawler featuring prominently on this cover. So let's open this one up. Oh yeah, one other thing I want to observe is, of course, one of the earliest new additions to the all new, all different X-Men was Kitty Pryde, a teenager who was experiencing difficulty in the beginning getting control over her mutant power, which had just developed because she was 13 years old when the X-Men encountered her. And then right behind her we've got Sarah Rushman, aka Marrow, who is the 1990s version of Kitty Pryde, altogether more troubled young teenager getting to grips with her powers and most particularly her monstrous appearance. So the cover caption is "A team reunited, a dream reborn." Let's open this one up to the first page. So Chris Bachalo was using the 9-panel grid over on Uncanny X-Men 360, and we see it continued here, at least for one page, by Brandon Peterson, catching us up on the situation with Kitty Pryde, who has made her mind up about Professor X, that he's not the genuine article. And so the professor tells the X-Men, these new X-Men, to take on Kitty Pryde and neutralize her. But even as I say all of that here, you can see all of these images by Brandon Peterson. I think it's effective storytelling. I just want to also state that I think it's a missed opportunity. We've got potentially a triple gatefold cover on this glossy stock holofoil paper, and I think it's a missed opportunity that we don't get a triple gatefold cover. I mean, it's the 35th anniversary of the X-Men. We got it for issue 275 of Uncanny X-Men and for issue 325. Come on, Marvel. Give us a triple gatefold cover. It would be much more special. But back into the story. Let's turn the page. We get a really great double page spread by Brandon Peterson. Look at that. So we've got Professor X here saying to his new X-Men, "Serve your founder, stop her, my X-Men, by any means necessary." So a dramatic opening to issue number 80. And of course we get a roll call here of these new X-Men for any readers who weren't able to pick up issue 360. We've got Rapture here, Grey King, Mercury, Chaos here. I'm going to read that X as the Greek letter Chi. Crooks here, Landslide over here. But take a little look at them again and ask yourself this: don't they remind you of existing X-Men, like they're a blend of them? So doesn't Chaos here look a little bit like Havoc? Doesn't Rapture look a little bit like Mystique? Doesn't Grey King look a lot like Phoenix, a male Phoenix version? Doesn't Mercury look a lot like Colossus? And doesn't Landslide look a hell of a lot like a fat Sabretooth? And Crooks down here, a little bit of Nightcrawler going on with her, and Iceman there as well, with her power to control hot and cold. So yeah, a really cool double page spread by Brandon Peterson. You can really see how his art has developed from the Executioner's Song issues of Uncanny X-Men that he did all the way back in 1992, and he's really honed his craft over at Image Comics. And one of the things he's really worked on and that he's very talented at is, well, what is it? It's hair. So look at all the work he's doing there on the Grey King. Look at the work he's doing there on Kitty Pryde's head of hair there. Really, really excellent stuff. So the title of this story is Children of the Atom, and the creative team down here, Joe Kelly writer, Brandon Peterson pencils, inks by Art Thibert, but also with Dan Panosian. So Panosian helping out with some of those 36 pages. The color is by Liquid, and over here we've got the digital lettering by Richard Starkings. And I find this interesting that in the past, in the Bronze Age, you would normally get the order of credit to be the letterer before the colorist, and that was because back in the Bronze Age, the letterer would have lettered over the art itself, sticking down the letters, and it was the colorist was the last creative to touch the art. Whereas it's reversed in the mid to late 90s with computer coloring, where the colorist does the work before the letterer finishes off. And so you've got that reconfigured order of credits or disposition of credits. Okay, let's move on from this really nice double page spread, get back into the story. Kitty there is fleeing from the new X-Men, and of course she spent many years with Excalibur as well, or whatever the amount of years would be with Marvel's sliding timeline, and so she easily evades Mercury here and then Landslide, using her phasing power to phase into the basement of the flooded basement of this abandoned genetics lab. And she thinks to herself, good job, Pride, keep up with the smart lip. It might just keep you from screaming yet. I don't know how much more of this I can take. New X-Men, the professor's so cold. Press pause, back to tough guy, do the emotional thing later. That's very, very Joe Kelly dialogue there for her thought balloon. First things first, she thinks find a way out, but somebody weakly from off panel recognizes her. Shadowcat, help please. And she turns and sees someone she recognizes. Oh my god. So who could that be? Well, we'll find out a few pages later. This is a nice page too. Great anchor image here of Colossus ripping his way out of the wrecked original Blackbird, and Wolverine coming up behind him, and there's going to be a bit of tension between these. You can see Colossus there punching his way out through the metal hull of the plane, and Colossus exclaims, "Imposter dogs, I demand you show yourselves." And Wolverine says, "Oh, give it a rest, Tin Man. No one here's demanding anything for a while. So stow the platitudes and make yourself useful. Knock something down we can use for firewood." So you can see slung over Wolverine's shoulder is an unconscious Nightcrawler, an injured Nightcrawler. And Colossus is taken aback there. I like the little detail of the big question mark with colored in red. "Why do you talk to me this way?" Wolverine asks Colossus. And let's turn the page. Wolverine is more focused on Kurt Wagner, his old buddy from the all different X-Men. He says, "You did it. You put us down, Elf. Come on, pal, answer me." But Colossus is intent on getting an answer to his question, and Wolverine retorts, "And I'm ignoring you, Colossus, because if I answer, it might not be with words." So what's the beef between Wolverine and Colossus, at least on Wolverine's side? I like this little bit of continuity-minded characterization from Joe Kelly. Wolverine pops his claws and he says, "Kurt's bleeding like a sieve back there, but you're too busy strutting around like a ticked-off peacock to notice. You learned that back when you was Magneto's boy." And of course we can see that Wolverine has lost his adamantium. He's got the bone claws, and that's because Magneto ripped those adamantium out of his body all the way back in Adjectiveless X in this particular title's issue 25. So a nice callback to that old continuity from 5 years earlier by Joe Kelly. Now Storm makes her way out of the plane, she's on the ground. She was out flying. She lands and she says, "Enough." Weakly, "Sheathe your claws, Wolverine, unless these imposters were correct and I've landed with the wrong group of mutants who turn against one another like jackals when the food grows thin." Peter's decision to join Magneto was no less questionable, and that's a reference all the way back to Uncanny X-Men 304, which also had a portion of it drawn by Brandon Peterson. That's an interesting little coincidence there. Than your recent decision to enter into a marriage of convenience with Viper. So that's a reference to recent issues of Wolverine. We all make mistakes, says Storm. Nice top-down angle here on Colossus coming over to help Storm. And he says to her, easy little sister, I have you. And Storm likes that, little sister, ha. It's good to hear that again, old friend. So again, that call back to the all new different X-Men of Chris Claremont, Dave Cockrum and John Byrne era. Colossus here holding her hand, says as she touches his metallic face, even better to say it, Ororo. But she responds, but if you have me, then the question remains, who is our missing X-Men? So where's Rogue? Well, she's been KO'd by the Grey King, who's removed Storm's powers as well as Rogue's. And she's waking up from unconsciousness after hitting the ground. And who's the first person she calls out for except the man she abandoned in Antarctica? Remy. In issue 350 of Uncanny X-Men. And then she calls out for Wolvie, someone. Interesting, the first two people that she calls out for help. Two men, eh? And then there's a huge alligator and he's about to eat her. She doesn't have her powers, remember, because the Grey Kings neutralized them. And who comes in for the rescue? Not Remy, not Wolverine, not one of the men, except for Marrow. And look at that huge bone claw that she's pulled out of her back there. And she says, no Morlock would ever let a reptile get this close. But Rogue and her X-Men have so much to learn about the world. I should let you have your crunchy munch, pretty one, she says to the alligator. That's a hell of a wound that alligator's sustained there. Maybe then they'd learn to look before they sleep. I wonder, could an alligator recover from that? What is their level of healing ability? I don't know much about them, but maybe somebody in the comments. You never know. It's the internet. You never know who's watching one of these videos. A reptile expert might be able to tell me, because off goes the alligator back into the swamp. Remember, they're down in Florida. So Rogue there with a black eye, which is rare to see that for her, says, Marrow, guess this means you like me better than an ugly gator. And I like this little bit of characterization from Kelly. After a pause, she says, you smell better. I'll take it, thanks, says Rogue. Good stuff. Let's continue, get past the advertisement here, and we're back to the news reporter. So we get our plenty of exposition there. There's the protest ongoing outside the launch center, and there's also the aerial battle from the previous issue has been spotted, and the news reporter asks the question, is it a coincidence that this week marks the anniversary of the first appearance of the mutant terrorist Magneto? So I mentioned earlier Marvel's sliding timescale, and usually the way that worked was you were always to understand that it was always 7 years after the launch of the Fantastic Four's experimental rocket, where they were bathed by cosmic rays, so Fantastic Four #1. So, it was pretty much year 2 then that the X-Men show up in respect of that sliding timescale. So that would mean that from the vantage point of 1998, we're talking about Magneto's first appearance being roughly speaking, around the time of 1992, 1993 in respect of history, let's say. So there's no more Cold War context, and this scientist here says, why not simply tell the people what they're doing with the rocket and the anti-mutant deterrence that is part of its payload? This isn't the Cold War anymore, because obviously back in 1963 when the X-Men launched, the Cold War was in full effect, and it was all in the context of the space race between the USSR and the USSA. But what does this general say? He says, I'll tell you why. Because until they start branding mutants, you don't know who you're telling what to. And mutants aren't going to like a little project one bit. So, of course, one of the major themes going back to Days of Future Past is the whole Mutant Registration Act and the analogy between mutants and in particular the treatment of Jews in the Third Reich in Nazi Germany in the 1930s, branding them with Stars of David and so on and so forth, all in prospect of the final solution and annihilation in death camps, etc., etc. So we're getting that going on here, but in the 1990s, Dr. Peter Corbeau, that's who she saw down in the flooded basement. What are you doing down here? The professor says, and it's an interesting transition. Think about it. From the general and what he's saying there in the analogy to the treatment of Jews in 1930s Germany, the Third Reich, and then the X-Men's Jewish member, Kitty Pryde. Anyway, what does Corbeau say? He helped produce the mutant tracking satellite. He says that the professor is not the professor. He also says, whatever it is, he didn't even deem me worthy of cataloguing. It doesn't matter. So little time. This founder, I know what he's after. You have to stop him. God help us. But of course, they're interrupted by the arrival of the so-called new X-Men. We've got Grey King there with a phoenix effect around him. A very Dave Cockrum-esque costume for him, isn't it? We've got Crooks, we've got Landslide. Again, he just looks hilarious to me, like a fat Sabretooth. And Crooks says there with the flat scan, Landslide says, fry her up Southern style, babe, and I'll pound what's left. So Kitty takes Corbeau. She's going to try and keep him safe from the new X-Men. He says to her, no, Kitty, listen to me. I'm not important here. We both know that I'm not going to make it. So she says, not if we keep yapping. He says, Cape Citadel, the Banazi rocket, Shadowcat, its payload, the final strand of the net. You must stop it from going up without damaging the rocket itself. Listen, Dr. Peter Corbeau, could you be a little bit more specific? Could you give us exact information here? You're managing to say all these words. Just get to the point, yes? He says, if these X-Men reach it first, millions will. Of course, he was going to say die. So here we have another good look at the professor in the old wheelchair there. The new X-Men, of course. And they're threatening to kill Kitty Pryde. She does not know what tears deeper into her at that moment. Xavier's words themselves, so direct, so cold, or the eyes behind them, devoid of the love and compassion she once knew. Either way, the cut is deep and the break is final. So she says, with all due respect, Professor, she's got those quote marks around them, being ironic, slag off. And she phases through the wall with Corbeau, just in time to evade the new X-Men's attack. And then we're back in the Florida swamp, and Nightcrawler's waking up, and Wolverine there is tending to his old buddy, his old drinking buddy. He says when Nightcrawler asks Catskin, are you okay? Fresh as a daisy, bub, says Wolverine, but if you call me Kitty again, I'm going to break my rule about slapping around furry invalids. So Nightcrawler recognizes he's got a fever, that's why he's rambling there. Don't be sorry, Elf, says Wolverine tenderly. Sorry's a waste of time. And then he says more toughly, just get better. We got us a lot of catching up to do and a lot of brew to swig when we get out of here. So these old friends reunited. That's nice. And over here we've got a moment between Colossus and Marrow. So Marrow needs those bones from her back to be pulled out. If I could do it myself, it would already be done. She says, can't reach the broken bones. No good ones grow till old ones go. So Colossus says, this is going to hurt you. And she replies, they always hurt. This one will hurt just more. Do it, Russian. So he rips out that bone, as you wish. And then he says, sorry if that hurt. And then he adds, but I'm certain it didn't hurt half as much as what you tried to do to those innocent people the last time we crossed paths. So a reference back to Uncanny X-Men 325. And Marrow retorts, haven't you heard? Storm and I made up. Best friends now. But anytime you want to hurt me, go right ahead. It felt nice. And this is the bit that's interesting. Almost as nice as when your brother Mikhail would do it. So that gets Colossus' attention. But the director, Joe Kelly, he moves away from that conversation as Marrow simply says, if we get out of this, big guy, I'll tell you all about it. And then we focus in on Storm and Rogue. So they haven't got their powers back yet. And Rogue here says to Storm, as soon as I finally want the stupid powers, they up and leave me. Story of my life. The irony, eh? So here we have Colossus is going to carry the sled. He's going to pull the sled with Nightcrawler on it. Wolverine is still ribbing him. Keep the ride smooth, Pete. If he so much as flinches. And icily Colossus responds, he won't. Good, says Wolverine. And then he takes charge. All right, people, I'll take point. Marrow will watch our backs. She says, did you crack your head open on the way down, or are you just going senile, old man? Let's turn the page. She has a big mouth, of course. Look at this bunch. The Wind Rider and the Southern Belle are all but useless without their powers. Half of my arsenal is shattered, and the furball with the gut wound will slow us to a crawl. We're not going anywhere as a group. Now, what Marrow says there about Storm without her powers being useless, of course, she doesn't know anything, or she doesn't seem to remember the time that Storm was powerless, and that was the whole Outback era as well. Sorry, it wasn't. But the period between issue 185 up to the Outback period, Storm was without her powers, and she acquitted herself bravely and competently. So in any case, back into this story, Wolverine says, you better can that talk right now, Pipsqueak, or Nightcrawler will have to share a stretcher. I like that. But Rogue agrees, they're in bad way. Can we really stand up to these new X-Men and stop the Benazzi rocket in this condition? So Wolverine is angry. He says, I don't believe my flaming ears. What are we supposed to do? Sit here on our duffs? That's quitting talk, and I hate quitting talk. So now Storm is going to show exactly what she can do minus her powers, and that is give a big motivational speech. Now, a little bit of criticism regarding the art. Look at the musculature of Storm's forearm there, and this one here. That looks like a man's arm, and also her fist too. So I think Brandon Peterson needed to pull back a little, Thibert too, as inker on the rendering here. It just is a bit much for Storm, unless she's been working out on those forearms. She says here, big motivational speech, I cannot tell you how long it will be until our powers return. We're unable to cross this swamp with our accustomed ease, nor can I tell you what waits for us on the other side, aside from pain, strife, and danger. But I do know this, that there are terrorists out there threatening the lives of our kinsmen and our kind. And they're using our name to do it, the X-Men. They defile everything we've dedicated our lives towards. And powers or no, I will see those imposters stopped. So, they are not the X-Men, we are, and the X-Men survive together as a team, a family. So that is an arch theme of Claremont's original run. Joe Kelly tapping into that for the big speech. This is an interesting little device here of Brandon Peterson's, where we just get Wolverine's shoulder and side profile and his gloved forearm and hand, rather than the rest of his body. I find it interesting. I think it works. It's kind of weird looking on the page, but I think it works. Now, a confidential chat between the two senior members of the team, Wolverine and Storm, and Wolverine compliments her on the speech, but he says, I gotta ask all the same, Ro, you think we stand a snowball's chance this time? She pauses, ask me again later, Logan, ask me again later. And then we have a transition to a copy shop in Florida, somewhere in Florida, under the full moon, of course. This guy here, this worker here, is complaining to a friend on the phone about this and that. It doesn't really matter. This Fincho business here interests me. It's the name of the shop, and it's there on the wall. And is it a reference to David Finch? Did he help out with the inking on some of these pages? Or is it just a call out from Brandon Peterson to a peer that he admires? One or the other. So Kitty here phases up through the floor, and she sends an email to GW Bridge of S.H.I.E.L.D. Corbeau safe imposter X-Men to attack Benazzi rocket in the morning. Must send troops. But here we see the new X-Men. I really like this panel. I like the little detail there of Landslide smoking his pipe, and Crooks here juggling these fire and snowballs. I think that's quite good. And then Mercury there just posing like Warblade, which of course there's a little joke going on with his design. So this character here says, I forget her name just for the moment. She says about Kitty, the girl cannot do anything alone. The rest of the Judases lie dead at the bottom of a swamp. Will make the founder proud. Landslide says, that or be erased. Right crumpet, as one of those fireballs, it seems, lands on his forearm. So the founder arrives. Stop, X-Men, and listen, he says. Though you did disappoint your founder today, as always, I forgive you and have remedied your errors. Pride attempted to contact S.H.I.E.L.D. and alert them to our plans. I intercepted her traitorous thoughts and destroyed the message. So that message hasn't gone through to S.H.I.E.L.D. He says here, soon we will eliminate her before she has the chance to interfere with the program tomorrow. Now this is the first point. This character, the founder, whoever or whatever he is, has always referred to his dream, and now he's referring to the program. So the diction has changed, and it's much more computer-related type diction. There will only be one group of X-Men, the rest are no longer viable. So pay attention to that for the reveal at the end of the issue. So here we go with the X-Men here cutting their way through the Florida swamp. And there's third-person narration here. Never mind about that. Here they are. They've made it to the Cape Citadel. And Nightcrawler says, I may be accustomed to third-class travel, but this is ridiculous. Antonio Banderas would never work under these conditions. Now, I want to comment on this. Why? Because obviously back in Giant Size X-Men #1 and the all new, all different X-Men, Kurt Wagner was an admirer of swashbuckling film stars, but who was his favorite? It was Errol Flynn. So whenever he would use the Imogen juicer, he always used it to give himself the appearance of Errol Flynn. But this is 1998, and like I said, the anniversary of Magneto's first appearance at Cape Citadel is 6 to 7 years earlier. And a more appropriate reference now would be to Antonio Banderas. And which films? Robert Rodriguez's El Mariachi and Desperado, I'm thinking. Desperado came out in 1995. So back into the story though. Oh, by the way, last point I want to make is I don't think it's necessary to give the updated reference. I understand it. I understand very well why it's so. But I think it's just as likely or credible that Kurt Wagner could be a fan of Errol Flynn in 1998 as much as in 2025. I don't think that needs to be changed. And now I'll get back into the story. So he says, please don't take offense, Peter, but I prefer to be upright when I race against impossible odds. So he gets up from the stretcher. Logan asks Storm, I know Storm, it's later, and you believed every word of her own speech. So they're going to go do it. They're going to go save the day. And then we've got the news reporter again. So she's kind of acting in the office of narrative exposition. Tension at an all-time high, hours away from the launch at Cape Citadel. It's the morning, the launch of what, of course, has remained a mystery until now. So what's it all about? It's all about this anti-mutant system. And Kitty's up here. She's overheard what these workers say about if you happen to be a mutie, sayonara, I say. And Kitty thinks to herself, so far so good, but what the heck am I supposed to do now? When I left Corbeau, he was barely coherent, in no state to explain to me what's on that rocket, or how to stop it, or even why. Maybe I can hack into the control tower from here and get the scoop. Because of course, Kitty's an ace computer programmer and hacker before my new friends show up. And of course, the new friends show up. Chaos and Landslide. And Kitty's here thinking that she's in trouble. She's tired. She's exhausted. She can hardly concentrate enough to phase. But she still comes out with the zingers. As long as you don't sit on me, fatty, knock yourself out. And Wolverine's there to hear just what she said. Nice zinger, kid. But leave the one-liners to the old-timers, huh? After all, we're the best. We are at what we do. So it's the X-Men. They're there. They're the true X-Men. But meanwhile, the fake X-Men, I'm going to call them the fake X-Men from now on, are there threatening the rocket launch staff and the Grey King goes into action. So he's got telepathic and telekinetic powers patterned on those of Jean Grey and Phoenix. And he says to the Professor, Professor, I've reached the vessel. Can you hear my thoughts? Of course, child. I'm always with you, body and soul. So there's Joe Kelly parodying Chris Claremont's dialogue there, one of the Claremontian phrases, body and soul. This is the moment I gathered you for. Tear open the payload, hatch, secure our goal. And Grey King says, so that your dream may live, I will, sir. We all will. But there's an intervention here. Who's it by? Let's turn the page. It's by the true X-Men. And mostly all new, all different, with the addition of Marrow and Rogue. So that's a pretty cool image by Brandon Peterson, but it's not as well composed as the cover one by Carlos Pacheco. It's the same moment. I prefer Pacheco's version, but this is pretty decent. In particular, I think he does a good job there on Colossus. So there's a little bit of banter there. It's actually not necessary. Kitty Pryde says to them, could you guys have cut it any closer with the last minute save? I think that's the only dialogue we need on this particular page. Let's continue with the story though. This is a good page. This is a great anchor image here in the middle of the double page spread of the fight between the two different camps of X-Men. And we're told here the initial onslaught, and by the way, the prose here, probably deliberately by Joe Kelly, is very Claremontian. The initial onslaught is as ferocious as it is swift. Two clans of titans, genetic misfits, raining thunder and fury upon one another, wrapped in a dance of sublime violence, each fueled by soul-burning passion, honor forged in struggle, and unswerving loyalty to the greatest mind on the planet, but serving two distinctly different dreams. So over in the control launch room, one of the engineer scientists says, initiate emergency launch procedures. And somebody off panel says, but sir, those people are on the launch pad, they'll be scorched. They're not just people, they're the muties, that this mission is all about launch, says the engineer there. So let's continue. Again, great image by Brandon Peterson. Congratulations for that one. But the launch doesn't work. It's been delayed, human, says the professor, until I acquire that which I've come for. The program cannot be interrupted. So the news reporter there is saying pure chaos, and now, oh god, now two groups of mutants seem to have banded together to destroy the rocket and its cargo. So she's got that wrong. Can you imagine? Misinformation from the TV news? It's incredible, right? Anyway, she continues and says, I've never seen anything like this. They're tearing into the crowd like we're nothing to them. We're extinct, we're extinct. And then Storm it is who exclaims, X-Men to me. That was always the professor's line. She continues and says, this battle places innocence in danger. We must find a way to draw our adversaries away from those innocents. So that is the true X-Men. That's the true professor's dream of peaceful coexistence and protection of innocence. Here comes the apparent professor. Look how the wheelchair has changed though. It's no longer the what would you call it, like the normal wheelchair. It's the one from Adjectiveless X-Men #1, designed by Jim Lee. But look at the color with Shi'ar Tech. It's kind of gunmetal grey rather than the gold that it was in Adjectiveless X-Men #1. The professor, with quotation marks around that, says, mutants, heed my words. This conflict is useless, for you cannot defeat my X-Men. They are superior to you in every way, selected to complete my program efficiently and definitively. So there we go again. The diction, as I said earlier, has changed from dream to program, and that's a clue as to the identity of this character. Please, for the sake of the program, he begs, stand down before you're annihilated. So these are all shocked. They haven't seen him like this yet. Storm and Colossus, they know that something's up, something's wrong. We're going to get a big explanation now finally as to what is going on and what this character wants. What madness is this? Asks Nightcrawler. But over here, this is interesting. Kitty Pryde whispers to Wolverine, I've been wishing I had your hypersensitive sniffer for the past day, Wolvie. There's that piece of diction again. Joe Kelly, sniffer for a nose. Never heard it before, never heard it since in the X-Men comics. Tell me you're catching a whiff of him, says Kitty. Tell me what he really is. Working on a kiddo, says Wolverine. So you can imagine them trying to sniff the air over from where the professor is in order to figure out whether it is the professor or not. It's kind of hilarious in a way. Anyway, we're going to get the villain's explanation. And Storm asks a question that some readers would have. Are you under the influence of Onslaught? I am not. Thanks to the assistance of Kitty Pryde for the first time in too long, I have a clear vision of the steps I must take to fulfill my ultimate program, not dream. The key lies within that vessel, a device that will allow me to find and catalogue every mutant on Earth, a purpose far nobler than its intended one, ultimate mutant genocide. The Mutant Defense Net, he continues, is a covert government program utilizing an array of satellites in geosynchronous orbit, which have the ability to pinpoint mutant activity down to the square foot. After the offending mutants have been identified, they can be expeditiously eliminated with little collateral damage to the surrounding human populace. So look at this. Here are the lasers there targeting the mutants. The Benazzi rocket holds the final most critical component of the system, the satellite that scans the surface of the planet for mutation. I cannot achieve my end if it is allowed to launch. The mutant defense net must be bent to my will. So Colossus whispers over to Kurt, his eyes, Kurt, look at his eyes. I'll never forget the first time I looked into the eyes of Charles Xavier. Never forget his first words to me. So from Giant Size X-Men #1, powers such as yours belong to the world, Peter, to be used for all the good of all. That man taught me what it meant to be a hero. I tell you now, this man before us is not Charles Xavier. So Kurt concurs, but the weird thing is, the eyes there on the drawing by Brandon Peterson, they actually look the most human of all the renderings of the apparent professor in this issue. So the image and what Colossus says don't jibe, kind of comically in a way. So Storm, or rather Kitty Pryde here with very big wide open eyes, says, listen to them screaming out there, they're terrified of us, that's the human populace. And Storm says, that is the handiwork of your new X-Men. Can you not see how utterly wrong this all is? This is not the world you've dedicated your life to. And he says, that world is not for us. The dream you refer to, it is a false reverie held by a pitifully deluded man, upheld by mutants who are obsolete. So Wolverine, sniffing away there, says, you know, Chuck, I've been holding my tongue while you've been breaking my heart because I wanted to be sure you weren't just under some Yahoo spell. But the wind finally shifted and the nose never lies. Truth be told, I didn't really need it in this case because you ain't him, you ain't even human, but that won't stop me from finding a way to make you bleed. So Kitty there is surprised at the fact that he's not even human. I mean, we've all figured that out by this point, right? So here is Wolverine leaping towards the professor. I really like this panel. It looks like he's electrocuted, like the spotting of blacks there. That's very well done by Peterson and Thibert. Your fellow mutant is correct, Pryde, says the professor, quote unquote. I'm unlike anything you've ever conceived of. I am the ultimate extension of Charles Xavier's most noble designs, designs which are about to be made manifest. X-Men carry out your orders, mutants prepared to be terminated. So what is this thing here? The Grey King goes into action. He's telekinetically torn open the hull of the rocket, or the space shuttle rather, and the Benazzi satellite is ours. So the safety protocols have been destroyed. This is creating another problem now. And off goes Grey King with the satellite component, but the rocket launches. The X-Men are there right under the rocket. Are they killed by the blast? There in the news reporter says the Benazzi rocket has been launched and is clearly headed out of control. If the core is breached on impact, the death toll may well be in the millions. This particular panel, take a look at it. This really evokes for me the image of Arthur Adams, inked by Terry Austin. I wonder, was that what Brandon Peterson and Thibert were going for here? But this could be plucked from 1988, 10 years earlier, and a Arthur Adams Terry Austin combination. And out of the tarmac phases, with the rain falling there because of storm, she's got her powers back. The X-Men and Kitty Pryde has saved them, of course, by phasing them deep into the ground to avoid the rocket blast. So they've still got problems, and the problem is the rocket and the satellite component. And Rogue steps up here, takes off her gloves, and she says, there's 6 of you and 1 of me. None of us alone can catch that rocket. But if I can absorb Kurt's and Peter's powers, plus Wolvie's military knowledge, I stand a chance of getting up there and diverting the rocket in time. Rest of you can take on our replacements once you wake up. So they don't have enough time to talk it over, no time to discuss it. Kurt here, the swashbuckler, says, you know me, anything to kiss a pretty Fraulein, Storm. Fraulein, and then he asks Storm, what does she think? Rogue says, I can do this, Aurora. I can keep it together. You trust me? Seconds later, we've got Grey King, and what is her name again? Let me just go back to the double page spread. Rapture, right? And these two are in love, rather like Cyclops and Jean Grey. The others are right behind. Let's stow the satellite in the Aurora and be off, says Grey King. And Rapture responds, you're amazing against those demons, Addison, before the others return. And here is Joe Kelly again, kind of impishly parodying Claremontian dialogue. I love you, body and soul, she says to Grey King, and I you. And that echoes many an interaction between Jean Grey and Cyclops and other X-Men characters. And off panel, here comes a put-down comment. Now that's vile. And turn the page. Who could it be? Of course it's Marrow, yes? If all X-Men have to ooze like that, then I quit. And that seems to me to be a bit of an impish comment about Claremont's X-Men, where there always was the romance, where there always was the little bit of sex going on between the lines of his comics. What does Storm say? She ignores Marrow. Now, while their forces are divided, strike for your lives. So here we see combo Rogue. We've seen that before. Again, in Claremont's run, where there was play with the idea of whether she could absorb more than one powers at once and how would that manifest. And so here she is with Nightcrawler, Wolverine, and Colossus's powers, and she's going after that rocket. And we get into her thoughts, where her thoughts are kind of a jumble of the different personalities. I'm a farmer in Lake Baikal. I'm a circus performer in Germany. I'm an animal in the Canadian woods. No, I'm Rogue, an X-Man, and I hate the fact that I can't touch a body without absorbing their memories and personalities along with their powers. But right now, those powers are exactly what I need to keep Florida from going nuclear. So I'll do my best to block out the 3 minds rattling my skull and get the job done, and then pause, bub. I like that, the humor of it. So there's fighting going on between the 2 different cohorts of X-Men, the true and the false. Here come these new X-Men for honor, says Mercury. Forget that, for blood, says Landslide. Fat Sabretooth, I'll call him Peanut Butter, says Chaos, because he's autistic. And up there we've got Rogue, and she's still thinking to herself. She's teleporting in order to get right after that rocket, because that rocket's going fast, of course. I'm being chased by an angry mob. I'm watching my little snowflake die. I'm hearing Mariko say she can't marry me. I'm teleporting miles at a time, trying not to throw up, and wondering whether or not Kurt's going to wake up with a headache. So here he is. He's up and about and tackling Chaos there. And here we see a very interesting thing, which is that Rogue has popped Wolverine's claws, and they don't look like they're bone claws. Look at them over here. They look like they're adamantium laced. Whereas, of course, Wolverine has only bone claws now since the adamantium was stripped out, and he wasn't born with adamantium. It's not part of his mutation. So is this a little bit of an artistic error, or is it just because we're at a distance from the claws that we can't see that they're actually bone claws? Let me know what you think in the comments section. So fighting, and the professor or whatever it is says this is not possible. Rogue is caught up with the rocket, by the way, which is important. Mostly horizontal panels here. That's interesting for the fight scene, especially Colossus taking on Mercury there. Kitty spots the satellite. Fabio with the flaming hair is making a break for it. That's pretty comical reference to the times. And Colossus here takes on Mercury, as I said. He says, "Pardon me, comrade, I need to have words with a real X-Man." Wolverine says, "You talking about me, Ivan? Dial Logan. Whatever has passed between us, whatever past needs burying can wait. We are X-Men right now, my friend. I need your help." So Wolverine gets it. Right, so what do you have in mind, X-Man? A little something called, it's the fastball special. Straight uptown, Petey. So up he goes and tackles Grey King there, who loses control, telekinetic control of the satellite component. The Professor X entity is upset. And meanwhile, we're in Rogue's thoughts. She's losing possession of the powers of her fellow X-Men. I think Colossus may have left too soon, she thinks to herself. But Rogue, after absorbing Ms. Marvel's powers, has super strength. So she was actually stronger than Colossus, right? So anyway, setting aside that little quibble, Kitty's there and she phases through the satellite component. When it lands on top of her, satellite go boom shaka boom, that's exploded. Professor X entity's upset. Rogue has guided the rest of the shuttle into the Atlantic there. It's going to whatever happens, it's not going to kill or injure anyone, just a load of fish. And there's the Professor entity raging there. Kitty comes over and says, "Excuse me, Professor, but I think you're all new, all defeateds need a few extra hours in the danger room. Just a little advice." Wolverine adds, "So how do we play this, Chucky? You going to give us the lowdown on exactly who you jokers are?" And here we go. The entity says program abort. And it looks like, because there's Landslide there, and I don't know who's over here, but in any case, they all kind of whoosh away, just like they're ghosts or streams of information, and they're gone. This is a really nice panel here by Brandon Peterson. Nice upshot. I think we're at the point that Panosian is inking these pages. Yeah, I don't think this is Thibert anymore. I think it's Panosian. And Storm says, or rather Marrow says, they're gone, but is that it, the end? And Storm replies, "Hardly, Marrow. Though we managed to avert today's disaster, we must pull together now more than ever to discover the true nature of the imposters and the whereabouts of the true Charles Xavier." So there's going to have to be a search for Professor X, the true one. So I like, by the way, we've got this triptych panel here, and it kind of breaks up the timing of the dialogue as well. So that's a nice little storytelling layout trick that Brandon Peterson is using. And a little bit of talk amongst the different X-Men there. And the question is, what transport are they going to use? So they take the Aurora. So it's the Blackbird, the new false X-Men we're using. "Isn't this stealing?" someone asks. Nah. Once the owner vaporizes himself, all goods are up for grabs. Kurt. Oh, so that's Wolverine and Kurt speaking. And who says this? Wolverine probably. Kitty, flip that switch. Let's see if we can pick up the military chatter. So the chatter is, "Ladies and gentlemen," the news reporter, "we have confirmation that the terrorist group known as the X-Men is responsible for the destruction of the Benazzi rocket. So they saved everyone, but they're getting the blame. We always do, even if they don't know it. They saved them. They always save them." So it's the X-Men. They're back with their original purpose, and so we're looking forward to a new era. And let's see. So S.H.I.E.L.D. retrieved the space shuttle from the Atlantic. And then we've got the general briefing the press there. He says, "Now more than ever, it should be apparent to everyone just how much we need this system. Are you all blind?" And the news reporter says, "The president is currently unavailable for comment. Having survived this crisis, having seen a covert operation nearly cause such destruction and suffering, I find myself asking this question. Who was the true villain behind the Benazzi incident? Mutants like the X-Men or the would-be hunters? Though disaster was averted, today we appear to have taken a step closer to genetic Armageddon. The question is, can that momentum be stopped? For News Minute America, I'm Paula Reinman. God bless and good night. And then we have the new X-Men here in the Florida swamp. And this is comical. Landslide has caught, killed, and barbecued an alligator. And the professor appears. Professor wants some gator, asks Landslide, no, I just want you to remember, children, I love you all. This would have been better on a page turn, but however, page 36 of the story, he absorbs them. So what are they? Data? He says, you are all part of your founder. The directive must be carried out. My first program was a failure, but I've learned a valuable lesson. By emulating the founder, I was not effective against his X-Men. Therefore, I will change program parameters. I will abandon emulation of the founder. I will abandon emulation of the X-Men to carry out the Prime Directive. I will eliminate them both, not as Xavier's avatar, but as an entity unto my own, as Cerebro. So Cerebro was the apparent professor all along, and somehow Cerebro has become AI and sentient and has a warped vision of what it wants to do. The beginning. But first, check out Uncanny X-Men 361 for Because You Demand It. It doesn't say that, but it should say it because that's the case. Gambit. So Gambit's back. Will he be emo Gambit? Or will he have a little bit of the old kind of charming rogue character about him? The one that at least I miss. And then here we go. Here's the bonus pin-up pages. So we've got one from John Byrne here of the original X-Men. So a callback to Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's team. It's okay. It's okay, the drawing. I know what's going on here, that he is in his inking trying to ape as far as he can the style of Tom Palmer, an inker that he admires extremely much. But it just looks a little bit low effort here. However long he spent on it, it looks like he spent 90 minutes on this. Over here, we've got an X-Villains pinup by Paul Smith. I think that's pretty cool, but I do think the ink line is a little thick. I'd say he inked with a brush. It might look a bit better if he varied it between inking with a brush and also with a crow quill. But look at all the callbacks to all the major villains the X-Men have faced over the decades. I think it's well done, including the Sidrian Hunters there in the Brood. And we get a double page pin-up Vision of Things to Come. That's a callback. Remember in X-Men, the deluxe edition of Adjectiveless X-Men #1, we got a Vision of Things to Come by Jim Lee. And so we're getting something comparable here. So we can see, it looks like the world covered in ice. Statue of Liberty, the pyramids covered in ice. What could be going on? The X-Men are here probably in Antarctica. And we've got Magneto versus Joseph. Why does Colossus need to wear clothes? Doesn't his armored form give him protection from the cold? And then we've got one page of letters. There's still space for a page of letters. And you know the way I always say, nothing interesting in the letters? That's not true here. These two letters are interesting, and the replies. So there was a question there about Maggot and why does he turn blue and what does it mean? A question I myself have had as I was reviewing those issues. Maggot turns blue, says Mark Powers. If Mark Powers or Jason Liebig, one or the other is answering this letter. Maggot turns blue when his little critters, Eenie and Meanie, are consuming matter. Usually the process of Maggot turning blue coincides with an increase in his physical strength as well. So that's why he might appear to be similar to the Hulk in the hue to strength way. But even though those are the hard and fast rules about Maggot's blue colouring, there may be some surprises yet to be revealed as the writers think them up. Here's a critical letter by a correspondent, and the reply is, good criticisms there. As for a regular artist on X-Men, we've got something really special lined up. Next month, Adam Kubert starts a 4-issue run that will be followed by a 6-issue run by Alan Davis. So that was pretty exciting at the time. Those are solid artists, right? Adam Kubert and Alan Davis. After that, says the editor, Liebig or Powers, we intend to have something just as exciting for you, but we're still working on it. Right, okay, like what would that be? They don't know. And then another response to a criticism of the correspondence is the intent when Joe Kelly and Steve Seagal took over X-Men and Uncanny respectively was for Joe to focus on the characters that were new to our canon, while Steve would shine the spotlight on the established members. Going hand in hand with that approach was a concentration on the individuals in both books and their personal stories. Now that we've done that, now that's a really kind of, what would I say, like a strategic way of saying they've changed their mind. Editorial has changed their mind about all of that, rather than the writers. The writers were on board for continuing with that. It's editorial has changed direction. Now that we've done that, we're way ahead of you on putting the team element of the book back at the forefront. Big things are on the horizon that are going to force the X-Men, new and old members alike, to start acting as a unit if they want to make it to 1999. And then there's just a letter of praise there. So there you go. I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on the giant-sized milestone issue number 80 of X-Men. Let me know your thoughts on this one in the comment section. Did you buy and read this when it first came out in 1998? What were your feelings about it then and now? Let me know in the comment section. If you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like and share the video. It really does help the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.